Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Review Diaries. I'm your host, Jackie Moore. This episode is a late night edition. I don't usually record at night. I try to do it during the day if I can, just because of lighting and everything, but I actually have found, at least just from sitting here and prepping, that it is much quieter at night. This is usually my bedtime. I'm not usually up this late. It is only 10:30. I have the most top of the line latest edition alarm clock, aka my cat, who wakes me up at 4, 5, and 6 in the morning every single day that he wants food. So I don't usually get to sleep in on weekends. I mean, I get up during the week to go to work, and it kind of just is what it is, but during the weekend I just have to get up because he just wakes me up and he will not stop until I get up. But for some reason my body just decided to take the longest and best nap of my life today, and I had planned to record this episode earlier today, but I just took like a, I think, 3-hour nap today. So it just so happened that I just didn't get to do it, and it is now 10:30. I am very much awake, and I didn't want to wait until tomorrow, so I just thought, why not? And also tomorrow is Mother's Day, so I'm going to spend some time with my mother tomorrow. But as far as this episode today, I am beginning my recap of season 2 of Bridgerton. If you have not seen my previous 2 episodes of season 1, and I went through every single episode. Today we are doing, like I said, episodes 1 through 4. And if you want to, you can go listen to my previous episodes. They're on my channel, in my profile, on the podcast profile, whatever you want to call it. So if you want to check those out first before you listen to this episode, that way if you don't want to sit and watch 8 hours of Bridgerton, you can pretty much watch my recap and you can have a lowdown pretty much of the entire season in like 2 hours or so. And I think with this season, the episodes might be like a little bit longer than an hour, just because in just doing this first part, there's just so much to cover, so many details, and I was just writing so many pages as far as my notes go. So I am anticipating that these next 2 episodes will probably be longer, and I also don't know quite how long the first 4 episodes of season 4 are. I don't think there has been an announcement yet as to how long each episode is, but I do hope that they are long, actually, just because, I mean, it's been so long since season 2. I think season 2 came out in like 2021. So this season follows the oldest Bridgerton sibling, who is Anthony. And if you remember, towards the end of season 1, he kind of reveals to his sister Daphne and Simon the Duke that his plan for the next season was to find a wife and marry. So that's where this season begins, and it is the start of the new social season. I guess the social season is pretty much like just the summer. They don't really specify, but I guess it is. I don't know if it's like a year-long thing, but yeah, that's just where it starts, and it is kind of him on his search to find his wife and someone who will help him like take over the Bridgerton household, be his Viscountess, and just bear his children, carry on his name, all that stuff. So the season begins with the Bridgerton family waiting on Eloise so she can make her debut into society, and she just absolutely hates her life right now. They have her in this like ridiculous outfit with like feathers on her head, and she's wearing a very nice dress. She looks pretty similar to Daphne's dress that she wore when she was introduced to or presented to the queen. And she's just hating her life, and she doesn't want to do it, but of course she has to. Queen Charlotte and Lady Danbury kind of heading towards the hall where she is going to be presented with all the ladies, and they are once again discussing Lady Whistledown, since she has not written anything since last season. And they're kind of just discussing if she is even going to make an appearance this season, if she's kind of maybe scared to come back, like that kind of thing. And as this conversation is going on, obviously we see the little paper boy start to hand out the papers to the rest of the town as this presentation is going on. And I did notice that the costumes were definitely elevated this season, because obviously each year it's customary that if a show does well, they get a larger budget. And I noticed that with the sets and the costuming, but specifically you can see a very dramatic change in Queen Charlotte, like with her colorful wigs and her costumes too. But also just in general, they do a lot of different things this season. They don't just go to balls the entire time. They have a lot of different activities, so the pacing in the show definitely, at least for me, which was much better for me, because I know I discussed in the last couple of episodes how kind of, I don't know, I was just kind of sick of the balls, like every single scene pretty much, anytime they just had an activity. So it was nice to see that they had different stuff to do and activities. It just made it more fun, and it made the world feel more real to me. So I appreciated that it did well enough to get a larger budget so they could do more. And so obviously, as we remember, the Featheringtons had financial trouble last season, and also the scandal with their father. And so obviously the Featherington girls were not allowed to be presented to the Queen due to their financial status, and then obviously the controversy surrounding their father dying and his just gambling and debts and all of that stuff. So I guess the Queen did not allow them to be presented. Obviously, Eloise is uncomfortable and just out of her comfort zone, and as they are making their way to the Queen's palace, Daphne is kind of trying to give her advice to calm her nerves and kind of tell her what to do. And also just in the other carriage, we have the Bridgerton brothers, as Anthony is telling them what he is looking for in a wife, and he just has this like super long and detailed ridiculous list of the requirements that he has for his Viscountess, which is a recurring theme throughout the show, that we see kind of how no one really meets his standards and what he thinks his Viscountess should be. So several girls are already presented to the Queen as Eloise is waiting with her mother, and she kind of wishes that Penelope were there with her to just kind of be there for moral support. And in the meantime, Penelope is at her house waiting for the Lady Whistledown papers to be delivered, in tandem with Eloise being announced when they are delivered to the Queen. So she kind of pauses the entire ceremony and stops everything and dismisses everybody so she can read what Lady Whistledown has said. And so obviously, as these papers are being handed out in town, everyone is just going nuts over them because she has not written anything in months. And you know that Penelope is making so much money with the Lady Whistledown papers because people just eat them up, and she is selling them like super cheap, and people just really have nothing to do in this town except gossip. So, you know, everyone in the town and probably nearby, if they can, is reading this paper. I did have this one thought after doing the first few episodes, kind of with how much money Penelope is making with the Lady Whistledown papers. I am curious to see how that is going to be explored more in her season, just because there's never really an explanation as to why she is doing the papers. And I really do want to see, I mean, I don't know how it goes down in the books because I haven't read them, but especially just with Colin, I want to see how all of that goes down. If there is a revelation, if she reveals her identity to him. Had she known that her dad was struggling financially and had all these debts, maybe would she have offered to help him financially and maybe reveal her identity to her family, maybe only? Because kind of like, what would that dynamic be like with her family if she were to tell them, you know? And I also kind of like that we as an audience are in on the secret and we know who Lady Whistledown is. It's like we have this little like secret, and I think that's a nice twist. And there's just so many things to think about with her character specifically, and I guess just kind of how she is going to evolve as a person, which I'm really excited for. Like I've said, she is one of my favorite characters. I think she is just so layered, and there is so much to explore with her. There's so many possibilities, and just for growth in her story that could be just explored. And also we learn how Penelope prints the column. So she goes to this printer in this like kind of rough side of town, I guess, and she is impersonating someone at the printers who quote unquote works for Lady Whistledown to preserve her identity. And we get to see Nicola's Irish accent, which I love. If you've seen like Dairy Girls on Netflix too, if you've not watched that, please do. Dairy Girls is just so funny, and it's one of my favorite shows ever. So getting to see little glimpses of her actual accent was so much fun in these scenes, and I really like that too. Thank God Anthony's god-awful sideburns are gone for good, and the lovely Bridgerton glow up for each lead is in full effect with Anthony. I know that people say on social media that each season the lead just gets just so much hotter, and I do see that progressively, like as each person's season comes closer, they do like little tweaks in their appearance. And so Anthony is discussing with his family how he kind of had arranged interviews with a bunch of eligible ladies and compiled a list of ladies in town. And of course his mother laughs at this idea because he just sounds ridiculous, like he is, I don't know, interviewing them for a job or something, and he is not like actually looking for a love connection, I guess. And he is very thorough with his questions that he asked these ladies, and it's kind of funny because he is also taking his duties as a Viscount more seriously, and it's nice to see that. But he's also still sleeping around with prostitutes and that kind of thing, and obviously him coming in with these sets of questions doesn't really offer like the chance to see if he even has an actual connection with any of these women, and it's all just very dry conversation and very like, I don't know, he's kind of just doing this in such a different way to, say, Daphne. And so on a ride home from meeting a woman or like sleeping with someone, I think he sees a woman riding off on a horse, and he thinks that she is in trouble, so he chases after her. So this is when we are introduced to the lovely Miss Kate Sharma. So they race together, and she beats him and shares this like knowing look with him as she goes off, but he catches up with her again afterwards, and immediately their chemistry is just off the chart, and I was just eating it up. So he tries to make conversation with her, but she's kind of like, no, just leave me alone and go about your day. So she rides off because he tells her that she is going in the wrong direction, and they kind of go their separate ways, and that's pretty much that. So Lady Danbury arrives at Lady Mary's house, and we are introduced to Edwina Sharma, who is Kate's younger sister. And Kate eventually arrives with a muddy dress, and we are also introduced to their very adorable dog. He is a corgi named Newton. So Lady Danbury is there to help the girls prepare to be introduced to society with lessons. So dance, etiquette, French, etc. Like all the good stuff that women are quote unquote supposed to know before they're to be married. So we learn that Kate is 26 years old and she is unmarried, so she is labeled a spinster by their like society standards. And I mentioned, I think in the last episode, how ladies of like this time period or this town kind of really only had 2 or 3 seasons to marry before they were labeled as spinsters, which is what Kate is labeled as. And Kate's only goal with being in London is to help her sister secure a match and be married. She has kind of tasked herself with helping her sister be just educated in a variety of topics, instruments, languages, all kinds of like dance lessons. So just basically molding her into like the perfect candidate. And her sister is just beautiful and just a very like sweet person, and really all the makings of a great match for somebody. And Kate is kind of like, I appreciate you to Lady Danbury, but we don't really need your help or your lessons. So the Featheringtons are to get a new heir, a new male heir to take over their house. And this is also their cousin. And I thought it was a funny little scene when their like head maid comes in, because all of their staff had quit except for the maid, who now basically does everything for them since they have like no money to pay anybody. And so we are now at Lady Danbury's like first official ball of the season. She always hosts the first one, and the Sharma girls just look absolutely just stunning. Lady Danbury kind of highlights suitors for Kate in case she was interested in pursuing a match, but Kate is kind of like, nope, I'm only here to help my sister. I'm not interested in any of that. So after this, Queen Charlotte arrives in an outfit that is just dramatic as ever, and Lady Danbury introduces the Sharma girls and her mother, Lady Mary, as her guests for the season. And so at this point, we learn some history as far as who Lady Mary is, because some women in the town are gossiping. So apparently she was like the diamond of like their season when they were younger, and she ran off to marry this Maharaja in India who had already had a daughter, and that is Kate. So Edwina and Kate are half sisters. And of course, Penelope is eavesdropping and listening in on this conversation. So Eloise arrives after this with Anthony, Benedict, and their mother. So their mother loudly announces that Anthony is on the search for a wife this season. And I thought that scene was just literally hilarious, because you see her like dramatically just say it so loudly, and Anthony just panics because everyone's heads just kind of like whip over to them, and they just all start like flocking over to the two of them. Mr. Finch's parents talk to Lady Featherington as their son is still courting Philippa, and kind of wanted them to discuss Philippa's dowry since the new Featherington heir had yet to arrive, and they kind of wanted to see when they would get their dowry because they have been courting for a while. So she makes kind of like just some dramatic excuse, and they kind of like just run off after that. So from across the room, Kate recognizes Anthony and says that she knows him. So of course, Lady Danbury is just all over that, and she is fawning over Anthony, saying how the Bridgerton family is just, how amazing the Bridgerton family is, and how he will most likely be the most eligible bachelor this season. So Edwina is asked to dance by this, like, I guess, lord or just young man that is at this ball. and she accepts the invitation after Kate kind of gives her permission, or is like, yeah, it's good, you can go dance. And then Lady Danbury kind of tells Kate that, she kind of needs to back off a little bit, that this is not how things are done, that it would be rude for Edwina not to dance at a party if her dance card was not full, and that Kate basically has like a lot to learn, which I thought was just iconic, as if she could even get any more iconic. And this season really just did it for me with her, to be honest. Every moment that she had, I was just like, you with your cane, you're an icon, and I just adore her so much. So Anthony is kind of having a hard time dancing with this girl who kind of really can't dance, so he takes a breath and steps outside, and he bumps into 3 other guys that are just kind of outside drinking, not really participating in the party. And Kate steps outside shortly afterwards, and she hides behind like some bush to kind of eavesdrop on their conversation, and she hears Anthony kind of express his extensive requirements for what he's looking for in a wife. So she trips over this pot, and he spots her and comes over to talk to her. So she kind of comes for him and ridicules like his requirements, and saying that as if a woman of that high of a caliber or education or whatever would ever even accept his proposal or his advances, that women are just not that simple or easily won over by a pretty smile. And he immediately just like runs with that as if it were some kind of compliment. And so she kind of leaves him speechless like yet again, and she does that like throughout the entire season so many times, and I love that for her, because we just see him be so used to women just fawning over him, and he kind of really needed someone to give him a reality check. And we see a lot in the season too, Lady Danbury and Violet Bridgerton's friendship, and I just love them together because we kind of get to see their perspective of everything that is happening from just an older generation. So Kate and Edwina come up to them, and Kate says that they kind of have to leave, and Lady Danbury is trying to prevent them from leaving, but they eventually do anyway. So at home, Penelope says goodnight to her mother and her sisters, but she actually sneaks out with the Lady Whistledown column to get it to the printers before it can be sent off in the morning. So the Queen has yet to select a diamond of the season since she cut the presentation. And so after the first ball, we kind of see how it was in Daphne's first season, when the ladies would go out, and then the morning after they would have like all these potential suitors. So much like Anthony did during Daphne's first season, Kate is constantly interfering in Edwina's like potential matches too, which I thought was such a nice little parallel. And I also love that we see more of Eloise this season, and her character just kind of developed more, and her sense of humor. I thought that she was just hilarious in so many scenes that we see of her, and her mother is just so intent on helping her marry, and she literally just could not be any less interested. And I also just really love how we see so much more of their mother and her personality, because she truly just only wants her children to be happy and for them to find love. I mean, the rest of the town just holds them in such high regard, and you can see how especially Daphne and Anthony have this like pressure of perfection on so many different sides. I mean, Daphne wanted to find a love match that was suitable to also just help launch her sisters into like a good potential match, and Anthony just wants someone who is just absolutely perfect and will set just the standard for the family and future generations to come, just because they will carry the family name. And so I like seeing them have these struggles internally, while also just having a mother who supports them and wants them to truly just be happy. And she also just tells Anthony in this moment too that with these high expectations that he has for a wife, that he will most likely end up alone, which is a nice little reality check for him. So Prudence finds letters that Penelope has been writing to Colin, and she kind of makes fun of her for it. And then her mother says that there's just no way that Colin Bridgerton would ever want anything more with her, and that she just needs to stop wasting her time. And then Lady Danbury receives a letter from the Sheffields, who are Kate's grandparents, and she kind of asks what Kate's purpose is in being here, that they're using her connections, her money, and her title to be sponsored by her for the season, when she thought that she was doing a friend a favor. And Kate basically says that her grandparents said that Edwina must marry someone of English nobility, and that otherwise they will not give her a dowry or support them, as their father didn't come from money and their mother had to basically raise them by herself, and they have like no money now. So Kate opens up about how her entire purpose with just being in London is to ensure that Edwina marries properly and that she is not destitute. Since she is not her mother's child by birth, Edwina is the only one that could be secured a dowry. And so we are at another ball, and Queen Charlotte has yet to pick a diamond for the season. So Lady Danbury sticks up for Lady Mary and her daughters, since Queen Charlotte is a little bit cold to them, I guess, just with how Lady Mary kind of left London when she had first married her husband. So after this, the Bridgertons arrive at the ball, and Eloise kind of makes a joke to the queen, and everyone kind of panics and thinks that she has insulted the queen, but she actually makes her like crack up and laugh, which I thought was a great moment between them, because I think the queen and Eloise have just such great moments together. And after this, Eloise and Penelope have this little moment together that I thought was just very sweet, of them just being two young friends kind of opening up to one another and trying to just navigate the pressures of growing up and what the expectations are and what their situations are in life and what they want for themselves. They kind of open up about their feelings, and Penelope with just kind of being a wallflower or an outsider, and then Eloise just kind of how she feels about people, comparing her constantly to her sister, and how she kind of feels like she will never be able to be like her sister or achieve anything that she has, and just that she wants something different for herself too. And so after this, the queen finally selects a diamond for the season, and of course it's Edwina. So Anthony immediately just clocks Edwina from across the room and takes notice of her, as a ton of other men flock over to her, but the queen addresses Anthony first, and they have their first dance together. So as they're dancing, of course, Anthony kind of runs down through his extensive list with Edwina, and the girl passes with flying colors, like she is just perfect, and I love her. She's my multifaceted queen, and I just think it is great for her. So they have a little moment too where he asks about her father and kind of meeting him, and she says that he died a couple of years ago, and he is like, oh, mine did too. So I thought that that was a nice little bonding moment for them that was real and not some like concocted situation. Lady Danbury comes over with Kate, and Kate takes Edwina away and tells her to stay away from Anthony, and Anthony is kind of like, nope, that is the woman that I am going to marry. So the Featheringtons arrive home with the new Lord Featherington. They're at the house, so he has paid Philippa's dowry, so her and Lord Finch can get married, and he has basically taken over the house and the rooms because it is now his. And so after this, we also end with Lady Whistledown's kind of nod to Eloise in her column slightly, with not just gossip and maybe some slight substance as far as what expectations are of women, that their value should not be measured in how many instruments they play, languages they speak, etc., etc. So basically, everything Eloise, our little feminist, had been saying. So after this, we are on episode 2, and Edwina has this like massive line of suitors waiting to meet her at Lady Danbury's house, and Anthony kind of happens to be in that line as well and asks Kate if he can escort Edwina to the races, but she says that she's basically busy forever and that she will never be able to like be with him alone, I guess. So Penelope catches Eloise reading Lady Whistledown as they were talking about her, and then Colin returns from his travels for the summer. So Penelope is obviously very excited, and they exchange these little glances with one another as Hyacinth and Gregory interrupt, and they kind of jump up to hug Colin very excitedly. So after this, everyone in town is at the royal races, which was, like I said, a nice change of pace from having basically a ball every single scene. So Lord Lumley is escorting Edwina alongside Kate to the races as a Mr. Dorset expresses interest in Kate and asks to escort her also. So Anthony comes up to them when they are sitting in the stands and expresses to Edwina that he is interested in her and that he wants to take her to, I guess, get food or breakfast or something. And Lord Lumley, who is meant to be escorting Edwina, is basically fangirling over Anthony, which I thought was very funny. And so Lord Lumley goes to get Edwina a drink, and Anthony jumps in and takes over his seat to sit in between Edwina and Kate. And Penelope sees Colin at the races and tries to be subtle, so he will talk to her. So they discuss his travels and the letters that they wrote to each other, kind of catching up, but Eloise interrupts them and kind of whisks Penelope away to show her this pamphlet that she found that she believes is from the same printer that does the Lady Whistledown columns. So Penelope kind of tries to play it off and eventually runs off to join her mother and her sisters. So in the stands, Kate and Anthony are kind of bickering over what horse is going to win. And yet again, Anthony is just left at a loss for words. He's kind of like just always shocked whenever Kate says anything that is not kind of what he is used to. And so the race begins, and the horse that Kate said was going to win does, but Anthony takes Edwina away after the race is over before she can stop him. And Mr. Dorset apparently knows Anthony and says that he had kind of plotted for him to distract Kate while he tried to get to know Edwina. So obviously this pisses Kate off, and she goes to Edwina and takes her away. And also Philippa and Mr. Finch are married, which I love because I just think that they are just so cute together, and I love that they actually could be able to get married, because I think the whole dowry thing is so stupid. I know that was like how it worked before, but I thought it was so stupid that they couldn't get married before like the dowry is paid, but whatever. But happy for them that they got married. And so after this, Lady Danbury takes Kate and Edwina to Queen Charlotte's, who randomly just has like zebras in her grounds for some reason. She was like, "These are called zebras," and I'm like, all right, cool. So Queen Charlotte is of course wearing this like freaking periwinkle wig and periwinkle blue dress, and she is still on her hunt to uncover who Lady Whistledown is, and she's just an icon in her blue wig and blue dress, and I love her. Oh, I cannot wait to see what kind of look she pulls out for season 3. Because, I mean, her wigs are just like so dramatic and just like they get taller and more intricate as the season goes on. And I just love it. And it just matches the style of her dress perfectly. And I just love her so much. And now we are at a poetry reading at Lady Danbury's house. So various men are just very thorough in their efforts in trying to court Edwina and impress her with a variety of talents. And Edwina is obviously waiting to see if Anthony is going to show up. And she has this little short conversation and introduction with Penelope when Colin arrives. So at the races, when they were discussing his travels, Colin said that he kind of didn't feel super lonely when he was away. And Penelope assumes that he had kind of met somebody. But in this moment at the poetry reading, he clarifies that her letters actually helped him like kind of find himself and motivated him to do some soul searching to fully understand himself, and he is kind of sworn off women. And I hated this moment. I was kind of like, oh my god, shut the fuck up, like don't say anything, because she's kind of like, well, have you like sworn off like me? And he's like, no, you're Pen, you don't count. And I'm like, I know he probably didn't mean it that way, because he's sweet and caring, and I know he probably didn't mean it that way, but because her feelings for him are just so like intense, and she's so in love with him, and she's just so sensitive and sweet and just innocent too, I know that it just like crushed her, because he basically just diminished her as a woman and basically says that he only sees her as a friend, which is kind of what her mom had told her he would only ever see her as. So I felt bad for her. I really want to see how he recovers from that, and from like other stuff that he says later too, that are just like him putting his freaking foot in his mouth. And I really just want to see Penelope stand her ground and make him like beg and apologize for it. I just can't wait. And so Anthony tries to get help from Benedict with a poem to impress Edwina, and he basically like creates one or recites one for him that he just magically came up with in 2 seconds, which is just so Benedict, and I'm just like, that's why I love him so much. But Anthony basically steals this poem and starts to recite it to Edwina and like the crowd, but it's directed to her, and stops midway and says that the words are not his, and he kind of tells her that he is not a man of word but a man of action and honor, and he hopes that that will be enough for her. And Edwina's just like, oh my god, and I'm just like, oh god. So Kate is obviously like not happy about this, and she abruptly just leaves the party and bumps into someone like super loudly that everyone kind of notices. And Lady Danbury sees her go into her room and says that it's sad that at only 26 years old she kind of wants to be alone. And I'm like, that is me. Even though I'm not 26, I'm 25, but I'm like, girl, that is basically me. I feel so seen with this season so many times, and I just I'm like, did Shonda Rhimes write this about me? Am I Anthony and Kate like split? So yeah, she basically is like, why at 26 years old would you want to be alone? And Kate is like, well, you're alone, so why wouldn't I like be fine? So Lady Danbury's like, well, I like, lived a life. I got married, I like have friends, I lost people, and I just experienced life, and I am older now, and you would not be able to have this life that I do if you like are alone, which is true. Okay, episode 3 was probably one of my favorites as far as like what we have seen, because it was just so emotionally charged, like from the very first episode, like the very first second. So in this episode, we finally get to see their father. And so it starts with a younger Anthony, and I don't exactly know what age he is, but it is still Jonathan Bailey playing him. He's just been made to look younger, and his father is teaching him how to hunt. And as they are walking back to the house, this shit, it was so sad. So they have this beautiful garden in front of this house that they have, and he sees these flowers that are beautiful and blooming, and he is like, oh my god, Violet would really love these flowers. And I was just like, this man is going to pick flowers from his garden for his wife. So literally, I'm getting teary thinking about it. Oh my god. So literally, as he's picking flowers for his wife from his garden, that is just so tragic to me. I guess the man was like allergic to bees. I don't exactly know like why this happened the way it did, but it happened so quickly. So he is picking up the flowers to give to his lovely wife that he loves so much, and he is stung by a bee in his neck, and Anthony just starts screaming for someone to help as Violet literally runs out of the house, quite literally about to pop out a baby because she is so pregnant, to like see what the hell is going on, because the dad is just like literally like toppling over on the ground, can't breathe, like is dying actively right now. And she runs over to him to like see if she can help, and he literally fucking dies in her arms. And I was just like, bitch, what the fuck are you doing to me? I have never been more distraught by a man that I had met 5 seconds ago. I just could not deal with it. So Violet is yelling at Anthony to go get his siblings because they're starting to walk out of the house, since she is screaming because they can't see him like this. And it just was so, I was just like, oh my god. And so that's really kind of the moment that all of this responsibility as a man really just falls on Anthony. Like literally immediately, he is now responsible for protecting his family, for being the Viscount. Like in one moment, in the blink of an eye, it's just such a burden to bear for him, along with the trauma of just seeing his father like die in front of him, and having to immediately just assume all of this responsibility. For so many reasons, I just related to Anthony in this moment from just my own personal experience that I won't really go into details about, but it was just very hard for me to watch the first time, as I had a kind of nearly identical experience of losing my father. And I just thought it was just, this is so dark and emotional, and it just, I don't know, it struck a different chord with me because I related to it in so many like different ways. And yeah, I don't know, it was just very sad. I get like emotional, like even just thinking about the scene, because it was just so sad. Lady Featherington comes up with a plan to get Prudence to marry the new Lord Featherington to avoid possibly being tossed out on the street if he were to marry another lady. And I thought it was just hilarious that Penelope was like, but he's our cousin. And she's like, well, why is that an issue? Like, look at the royal family. He's like your third cousin. It's literally fine. And I was just like, oh my god, all right. After this scene, Daphne makes her like grand return to the season with her and Simon's baby. And of course, at this point, Reggae had exited the show as Simon, and he is not going to be recast. He was just mentioned a couple of times throughout this season here and there. And eventually Phoebe, the actress who plays Daphne, also exited the show, which I hated because I really would have loved to see more of them and their perspective on just everything. I mean, we get to see that with Daphne a little bit throughout this season, but I think just because there's so many siblings stories like to still be explored, I think it would have been nice to see more of them. And I hope this doesn't happen with the rest of the cast as they're just like kind of slowly written off. I hope it doesn't happen since, I don't know, all the siblings are so close to one another, and I think it adds so much more to the show to see everyone's dynamics together, since they all kind of have their own little special and different relationships. So I'm just curious also with how this is different from the books, since I haven't read any of them. But Daphne is kind of catching up with her siblings, and Anthony tells her about Edwina and how she has this meddlesome sister who is obviously Kate, which I thought was amazing and funny because he was the meddlesome sibling when Daphne was going out for her first season. So he enlists his siblings to kind of help in his efforts to win over Edwina's affection. And Lady Danbury comes to visit the Bridgertons with Kate and Edwina and their mother, and they bring their dog Newton, which I love because he does not like Anthony and he's just such an animated little dog. Daphne comes over as Anthony and Kate are talking, and she's like, "Oh, well, you must be Edwina," and I just died because obviously it is not her. The Sharmas and Lady Danbury will be staying with the Bridgertons for a bit, and Anthony asks his mother for the family ring, and this episode is basically full of flashbacks too. We get to see kind of the full aftermath of his father's death. I mean, their mother just being inconsolable, and understandably, and every member of their staff is basically asking Anthony all these questions about arrangements, the funeral, what they are like supposed to do, since he is now the Viscount. And I guess it's like this house just because that's where he kind of passed away, and throughout the season we kind of just see how he is so affected, specifically with just being in this house. So I thought it was a nice touch. So the Bridgertons are playing this game called Pall Mall, which is, I guess, a less intense version of cricket. So the Sharma girls are always just kind of wearing the loveliest jewelry, and they love to use purple toned like fabrics on them because it just suits their skin tone like so nicely. And of course, as this game is starting, the sibling rivalry between everyone is just in full swing, and the Sharma sisters are just not used to that, since the Bridgertons are such a large family, and there's obviously like different genders in the family too. They're not really used to that dynamic in their household really anymore, I think. And so Kate grabs the mallet that Anthony usually plays with, and it's this whole like kind of joke. And I love that they bring out this competitive side in one another. And during this time too, Benedict reveals to Colin that he applied to this school to study art. And Lady Mary and Violet Bridgerton connect over the fact that they are both widows, which I thought was a nice moment. So I hope that we get to see more of their little budding friendship in season 3, since Violet's dynamic with Lady Danbury is just so amazing and I love it so much. And so as the game is continuing, Anthony and Kate are tied in the game, and I noticed kind of how everyone was weird or awkward with the fact that Edwina was not really good at playing this game. I just thought it was like funny how everyone kind of had like weird reactions throughout the game when it came to that. So Anthony and Kate, their balls go into the forest and they go off to find them, and Daphne kind of has this like knowing look on her face as they're walking off, as if she can see that there's some sort of dynamic between them. So they find their balls as they are bickering the whole way, and they're in these puddles of mud. So Kate steps into it, literally ruining her shoes and her dress, and Anthony's like obviously shook that she just like stepped in mud and ruined her entire outfit. And she just keeps shocking him at every moment, and I loved it. So she is, of course, stuck in the mud, and he tries to pull her out, and they both fall over, and they finally kind of like share this little laugh together. So I guess the wall kind of cracked a little bit between them. So they have this truce, and they both kind of finally realize that they are in the same position when it comes to who they are to their siblings and just their duties in general. Kate like whacks or kicks the ball over to a tree, and it falls on this bench that is underneath this tree, and Anthony kind of has this like look on his face, and he just leaves immediately. So Kate walks over, and we see that next to that bench is his father's grave. And so after this, we flash back again to the moment when Violet is giving birth to Hyacinth, and we can see that she is really struggling to give birth. I mean, the baby is turned the wrong way, and she's obviously just stressed and grieving and doesn't really know how to like cope with anything at this moment. So the doctor asks Anthony what he wants to do, and that obviously unsettles his mother, because I mean, Anthony is her son. That choice should not fall on him, but the doctor is kind of like, well, the duty falls on the Viscount, even though it's Violet's body. And I mean, I won't go too deep into like the political like implications of this as far as this moment goes, because it's very relevant to today, and I like that they touched on it as far as like whose choice it is when it comes to these kind of situations, and who to save, what to do, who is to decide like who lives. But Violet says that it is her choice, and the doctor is like, nope, it's his lordship's choice. And she was like, that could only be Edmund, because if he were here, that would not even be a conversation of like who to save. And I honestly can't imagine like how horrible that must have been for her, or just in general, like for anybody who is probably going through a similar situation like that, to just be pregnant, struggling to having to navigate grieving a partner, and having to also just do it without them, and also think about like having to raise a child without your partner. And it only just really made me love Violet's character more, because she has displayed like such strength in many ways, like always, but especially in this moment, I think. And Anthony says that it is his mother's choice, and that they are to do what she wants, which I loved. Y'all want to see my cat? If you're watching on YouTube, you can probably see my chunky man who just jumped on my lap to sit here. So if you can hear him purring throughout this, I do apologize. But his breath stinks like tuna. He's so loud. But he just wanted to jump on here for 2 seconds, so I just had to let him, even though his breath literally stinks. Stop. He's so loud. He purrs so loudly. I can't. So the Cowper family are over at the Featheringtons' house for dinner, and it's not going well, because Lady Featherington is trying to push Prudence into marrying their cousin, but he seems to be interested in Cressida, and of course her mother is just eating it up. And the new Lord Featherington asks Cressida if she can if he can accompany her to promenade, which, as you remember, is a very common activity in season 1. And of course, she accepts his proposal. And after this, we have this little moment with Eloise and Kate, which I just absolutely love because I think that they are pretty similar. I mean, Eloise is fascinated with the fact that Kate is 26 and has never been married, and she wants to know if she did it like by choice. And I like that Kate is honest with her in this moment and tells her that in spite of the fact that she is content with her situation and that it was her choice, that the world is not kind to women that are unmarried and that they have many, many struggles as far as just society and just living in general. And so we have a flashback scene again with Anthony and his mother, and it's a very, very sad scene because she is in one of the sitting rooms by herself, and Anthony comes in to check on her, and she is wearing her black clothes for mourning, and he tells her that she should join them all for family dinner, and she says how hard it has been for her to basically just like get up and take care of herself and even just breathe since her husband passed. And she says that he is the air that she breathed, and that without him there is just no air for her to breathe. And I just thought that was just so heartbreaking for her to say. And she kind of opens up about Hyacinth, and I love that she says that sometimes she feels sad that she will never know the love of her father, but in that same breath she also says that sometimes she wishes that giving birth to Hyacinth would have killed her so she could be with her husband. And in the present we see Anthony and his father's so in the present we see Anthony is at his father's grave, and his mother comes up with a bouquet of lilacs, which are his father's favorite flowers. And they sit down, and she says that this time in his life should be the happiest, and it should be just full of joy, and that finding the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with should not be such a burden. And he yet again talks about his duty and that he is fulfilling it by doing so. And I really love seeing these moments with their mother specifically because of the trauma that Anthony has experienced with his father's passing. Him seeing it, him being the oldest, it just affects him in a different way than it would the others. So seeing their mother have to both play the role of mom and dad just warms my heart because she does it so well. And you can see that, like I said again, all she wants is for her children to just be okay and happy, and nothing else really matters to her. And she also mentions how he was just a boy full of love and happiness when he was younger, and that since losing his father, he kind of sees love as a weakness, and it hit me very deep to my very core. And he says that love will have no place in his marriage, that he is simply doing it out of duty. And it also hurt me so much when he told his mother that he could not ever see him causing someone the amount of pain that his father did when he died. And that just hit her like a ton of bricks. You can see like by her reaction when he says that, since he said that he remembers like everything about what happened when he died, and that she was basically a shell of herself, even if she is, healed, a healed version of herself now. So at the dinner table, Benedict is high as a kite because Colin had given him some sort of tea for his like anxiety or something, and he basically poured like a whole bag into one teacup and drank it. And so as Anthony is giving a toast, he kind of acts as if he were to propose to Edwina, but he chickens out last minute. and I saw a lot of people on social media talking about the moment after this, and it is Edwina and Kate getting ready for bed, and they are using cocoa butter in their like routine. I guess they do it like in their hair or their skin or something. And I thought it was a nice touch because they added it as if it was just they added it because it's typical to their culture, and it was sweet to see so many people talking about it, how they felt identified by this moment or were portrayed accurately. And I know I talked about this show specifically doing such a good job with diversity and making subtle moments and nods to different cultures, which I think this season specifically highlights that a lot, which I love. And even in their like clothing, their jewelry, and just different choices that were made behind the scenes, I really appreciated that they took the time to represent such a beautiful and diverse culture with their lead characters. So Edwina is opening up to Kate about her frustrations that Anthony did not propose, and she is kind of crying, which is sad because she blames herself for him not proposing. And it's this beautiful like sisterhood moment, and I loved that you could see their bond and their love for one another. So Benedict gets a letter from the art school that he applied to, and he gets in, and it's a funny moment because he is still high from the tea, and he even opens a window and screams out of it to just announce to basically no one but to the world that he got in. And Colin asks Eloise about Marina, and she says that she is not actually far away from where they are, and we have not seen her all season after she married Sir Philip Crane to give birth to her baby. And then Madame de la Croix, who is the modiste in town, at some point had earlier on seen Penelope in the lower part of town when she was at the printers, so of course she knows that she is Lady Whistledown, which honestly was kind of, I don't know, she had done such a good job at like protecting her identity and hiding it, and in that moment she just happens to be in the wrong part of town and she is immediately spotted. And when Eloise had been in that part of town before, no one had ever seen her, and so she could have just as easily been spotted there before and have people think that she was Lady Whistledown. But anyway, she says that she is not interested in revealing Penelope's identity anyway, which is fine because Penelope goes to her shop after a new modiste arrives in town, and she had mentioned her in the Lady Whistledown column, kind of hyping her up to help her business. So they kind of are, I guess, like helping one another, like using one another for like their own benefit. And so after Kate had gotten back from doing some writing, Anthony is out in the garden, and we have the iconic bee scene where Kate is stung by a bee in the same garden that Anthony's father had been stung and died in. And it's this whole thing where she gets stung in the neck, and he immediately just starts having like a panic attack, thinking that she is going to die, and she is trying to reassure him that she is fine. And as he is panicking, thinking that she's going to die, she grabs his hand and places it on her heart, and eventually he calms down a little, and they're literally like about to kiss, like their lips are like this close, and they don't kiss, they like pull away because they hear like a horse or something in the background. And they both kind of run off in opposite directions, kind of being like, what the fuck was that like feeling that I just experienced? And so we are now in episode 4, and Edwina is expressing her frustrations yet again to Kate over Anthony not proposing, and says that it is because he and Kate can't stand one another. And obviously after that moment in the garden, they are both obviously very confused about like what they feel about one another. And so the modiste, Madame de la Croix, is now sending Penelope's drafts to the printers, sewn into the hems of the dresses, to protect her identity, as she is bringing more business from speaking out about her in her column. And so this next part, I'm going to break it up a little bit more, just because these events are happening like in tandem, but it would kind of be a little bit confusing for me to like go in between like what each situation is that's happening. I think it was just a lot because the scenes are not very long, but I'm just going to break them up a little bit for continuity purposes and hope that it makes like more sense. And so in this part, we are going to be with Marina and Colin at Sir Philip Crane's house. And Colin goes to visit Marina at the Crane's estate. And she has given birth to twins, Oliver and Amanda. So sweet boy Colin is just checking on Marina, seeing if she is doing okay after everything that she went through last season. And they're catching up and talking about Colin's travels when Sir Philip Crane arrives. And I must say, that man is very fine. Very fine. And I need more of him on my TV, please and thank you, Shonda Rhimes. And that is all I will say. But he invites Colin to stay over for dinner. And Sir Philip is very nice to Colin. They are both talking about Grace, and Sir Philip is a precious man and he loves like plants and flowers. So they were talking about like what he kind of saw and studied in Grace when he was over there. So Marina asks Colin after Sir Philip leaves why he came, and he says that he is sorry for how he treated her, and she says that she forgives him, saying that she has kind of left the past behind and have to kind of just adapt to like what her life is now at the moment. And he says that although Sir Philip is like a perfectly fine man and he is amiable, that she does not look happy, but she says that she is content with her children and her situation, and that Sir Philip takes care of her, and that she is kind of realistic as far as like her situation, and that he kind of needs to wake up, I guess, and realize that that's just life. And I kind of really hate that for her, because she was so against not marrying for love and the societal pressure and everyone's opinions, and really just her being a woman kind of like decided the future for her, and she is kind of stuck in this situation because she was just a woman in love who had sex out of wedlock and got pregnant, and then he died, which is very, very tragic for her. And she kind of tries to give him advice and saying that he should kind of really rely on those around him that care about him and open his eyes to others, like Penelope, which he kind of questions a little because the man is clearly blind as a bat, that Penelope is just so infatuated with him. So after that, he leaves. And then I'm going to talk about the Bridgertons like party that they're having, and it's like a massive party at their house with like everyone in town is invited basically, and they can stay because it's like it stays long or something, I don't know. So Edwina and Daphne are playing cards with Lady Danbury and Lady Mary as they're kind of having a conversation about Anthony, and Edwina kind of tells her that she wants Kate and Anthony to get along more, which is why Kate is off hunting with the men. So you can kind of see on Daphne's face that she sort of suspects that something is going on. And I think she, more than anyone, really knows her brother. And you can kind of see how she realizes that maybe there is something deeper going on that most people may not realize. So while out hunting with the men, Kate runs off since they are not listening to her or using her knowledge as far as like hunting. Anthony runs after her, so when he catches up to her, they start bickering yet again, and he subtly tries to talk about what happened after the bee sting, and they're both kind of like, well, you looked at me this way, and she's like, well, you looked at me this way. And so they are always kind of trying to compete with one another. And it's this whole thing where she is hunting and she's pointing a gun, and he tries to help her, and he kind of like catches a bit of her scent, which becomes more of a thing as the season goes on. And then the men like come in and interrupt their like little moment. So both Anthony and Kate can't sleep, so she goes downstairs to the little library I guess they have to read, and he comes into the room to speak with her. And I must say, her hair in this scene, it was giving. It was just perfect, and it looked beautiful on her. And he is wearing a puffy shirt, like a white shirt, which is just my weakness. And she asked him how his father died, and he said that it was a bee that killed him. This is literally 2 seconds for everybody watching this, but it has been probably 35 minutes of me dealing with technical difficulties, and I'm very tired, and my phone's about to die, and that's where I am recording the YouTube. And it is 1:30 in the morning currently, so yeah, just going to try and push through and finish the episode with you guys. Hopefully my phone doesn't, I try to charge it like a little bit, so hopefully it doesn't die while I am trying to finish up. This is one of the first times I noticed like how well Simone Ashley acts as far as like with her facial expressions, because they're so subtle yet they convey so much emotion, especially with her eyes. I know that we see like a couple of more scenes later in the season where she just really like conveying a lot of emotion, but this is like one of the first times where I actually saw her do that. But while preparing for a ball that the Bridgertons are hosting, Daphne and her mother are discussing Anthony and how they kind of think that he would have ended up with somebody that was more similar to him, because Edwina is obviously like very sweet and demure and even tempered and all that stuff, and just overall very quiet and agreeable, just like overall sweet person. So yes, the difference between their personalities could be good and offer some balance, but since that is really the kind of person that he is looking for when it comes to like qualifications, if you want to say that. But as far as like them having a successful marriage, like probably not, which is probably what Daphne and her mother probably mean and want for him. So also they just maybe want somebody that gives him a little bit more of a challenge. And so after this, Daphne talks to Anthony about Edwina just to kind of maybe get an idea of how he is feeling about her, and he kind of really tries to avoid the conversation with her since he is obviously struggling with his budding feelings for Kate and everything that happened yesterday with the bee and their like almost kiss moment. So it is now time for the ball, and all of the Sharma girls arrive in these beautiful pink ball gowns, and I love the dress that Kate has on. The color on it just looks beautiful on her, and then gold jewelry with like little pink accents throughout, and then there's just beading in the dress that just looks beautiful, and everything about it is just perfect. So Anthony asks Edwina to dance as soon as they arrive to the ball, and poor Eloise is just made to dance with a man, much to her dismay and disagreement, and she kind of makes it really like all of 1 minute before he just acts a fool and says something stupid that she takes offense to. So she tries to leave before the dance is even over and causes like a little bit of a scene with the crowd, and then her mother tries to come and talk to her because obviously they are the host of this ball, and her mother says that she invited this person specifically just because she has like a similar rebellious spirit, and this obviously upsets her because she says that this is not like some party trick that she just pulls out, or this like part that she plays, that it is simply who she is, and she knows that it may be like a disappointment to her mother, which makes me sad for her, since yet again we kind of see another Bridgerton sibling kind of struggling with these expectations that are set upon them, and this like burden that they have to carry, and kind of how they deal with that. So Edwina tells Anthony that he and Kate have to dance, and so they do, to this classical rendition of Robin's Dancing on My Own, which I loved. And the eye contact in this scene just went crazy, and I loved it. And I think this is when more people kind of started to realize that maybe there was something going on between them, because we kind of see some reaction shots of Lady Danbury and then Daphne also as they are dancing. Kate says that really she only wants her sister to be happy, and that once she is married, she is to return to India, and that makes Anthony like freaking panic, obviously. So in the meantime, Lady Featherington kind of concocts this whole ruse to get a group of people to see Prudence and then the new Lord Featherington unchaperoned alone together, and it would kind of be like a Daphne situation where Anthony caught her and Simon unchaperoned together, which is just genius of her. And obviously if they were to be caught, it would be a scandal and they would have to marry. So obviously this is what happens, and they are engaged to be married after this. So Kate runs after Anthony, like walks off when she says that she is leaving for India when her sister gets married, and she asks him like what the hell is wrong with him, and he asks if she will be leaving immediately after Edwina is married. And he's obviously distressed and just kind of struggling with everything, and she is confused why he is acting this way. And this scene, the acting was just giving. It was like giving Emmy, Oscar, Golden Globe, just everything. It was just perfect. It was amazing. Remind me to never record an episode again at night, because this is literally cursed. I've had too many technical difficulties, and it's starting to make me angry now, because it is now 2 a.m. and I'm in literally the last couple of minutes of this recap, and I just keep having issues. But anyway, it becomes this whole thing because she asks him, like, he asks her, like, why she doesn't like him. And it's that whole thing where she's like, because you vex me, and she's like screaming that at him, and it gets so intense, and he just starts like inching closer and closer to her, and he's trying to tempt her and be like, say you do not care for me, like tell me to stop. He's like literally like right fucking here, like right here, and he's saying all these things like against her ear. Their lips are quite literally grazing each other, and Daphne just like bursts in and catches them, and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I will step away, which is just so ironic because Anthony was the one to catch her and Simon, and she brings that up in like their next little conversation that they have afterwards. And Daphne turns to drinking because she is stressed, and I just found that so funny. And she says that clearly there is something between them, and that he just needs to be honest about everything. So this is really the first time that we see Kate be emotional about the whole situation, since it's kind of finally dawning on her that she has feelings for Anthony. And she is crying, and Lady Danbury comes out to talk to her and kind of says the same thing to her that Daphne did, that she just needs to be honest, because I mean, her sister doesn't know about the situation with the dowry or what her grandparents wanted, but Kate feels that she has ruined this for Edwina, and that now Anthony will not propose. So Lady Danbury kind of insinuates like her having to be honest, because she maybe kind of has caught on that she has feelings for him, but is maybe not saying as much to her directly. So as everyone is leaving the Bridgertons the next morning, Anthony finds the ring that he was asking his mother for, and he catches Edwina as she literally has one foot in the carriage, and she's so upset too that he has not proposed. So literally with one foot on the carriage, he like kneels down and he proposes to her as Kate was about to reveal the truth to her. And this is the end of the first 4 episodes, and this is where we end off this first part. Yeah, I'm going to keep this like outro pretty short because I'm very tired. Like I said, it is 2 in the morning. I'm kind of delirious right now, I think. So thank you so much for joining and for listening if you have all the way through. I really, really, really appreciate it. Like I said, remind me to never, ever, ever record an episode at night. And yeah, I will try to get the next part, like the next 4 episodes, up this week, like at least before Tuesday, because I plan to have season 3 part 1 up next Tuesday if all goes well and according to plan. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much again for joining me. Follow me on social media, all that good stuff. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, comment, rate, and leave a review on my podcast. And yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you next week. Bye.